Sunday of LGBTQ plus Pride Month, I wanted to share with you this beautiful psalm. It's one of my absolute favorites, and probably the second most shared with the patients at the Shattuck Hospital where I am the chaplain, after Psalm 23. I love this psalm because it tells us a few things. First, about the intimately close relationship that we have with God. The word know occurs 7 times in just 3 verses. God knows us completely. Now, to be honest, sometimes that can feel a little daunting to me. God knows all about me, even the parts of me that I'm not always so proud of, the little things and the big things. The days that I choose trashy reality TV over writing this sermon, for example, and the times I've lied to or hurt the ones I love. But the psalmist goes on to say in verse 13, "It was you, O God, who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb." Not only does God know us, but God formed us, our hearts, our souls, our entire beings, as imperfect as we are. God knit us together. We often think of creation stories when God created everything in 7 days, humanity included, or when humanity was formed from dust with the story of Adam and Eve. But rarely do we think so specifically about the ways God created each one of us. The imagery of being knit together by God is so beautiful. God put every single little detail into each one of us, each God's own work of art. Even the parts of ourselves that we're not satisfied with yet are created, known, and loved by God. The second reason is because the psalmist continues to say, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Regrettably, by today's standards, the idea of fear is usually connected to fight or flight and often connected to hatred. Yet here, it has a larger meaning of awe, of reverent respect and honor. A different translation might be awesomely or reverently and wonderfully made. Wonderfully comes from the root word which means to be different, striking, remarkable, even outside of the power of human comprehension. The same word is used repeatedly in the Psalms to describe the acts of God on behalf of humanity. Each one of us was formed and framed by God. God's eyes beheld our unformed substances. Each of us were reverently, remarkably, uniquely made. This is the comforting assurance of God's creation of and love for each and every person. If you read my bio in the weekly email, you probably saw that I have a wife, and that means you probably know that I'm queer. If you didn't know, now you do. And it's part of myself that I am proud of, a part of me that was created with reverence. Unfortunately, it wasn't always so easy for me, and it's much harder than that for many LGBTQ plus people, especially trans kids right now. Too often, shame is heaped onto queer and trans people by family, friends, strangers, and even society as a whole. Too often, violence is inflicted on queer and trans bodies. Too often, God's beloved, beautiful people are violated. And I want to say that God's beloved people of all kinds are being violated for way too many reasons in this country and our world, from ICE kidnappings and deportations to starvation and bombings. It seems that we forget we are all reverently and wonderfully made by God. And we are each exactly who God created us to be, for who we are now and for who we are becoming. The psalmist says, "Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it." The intensity of God's knowing us is beyond the understanding of the psalmist, beyond human explanation, so high that it can't be reached. And sometimes, in the midst of all that goes on around us, we feel disconnected from that intimacy of our connection to a God that knows us so well. And that could give us maybe some feelings of anonymity or anxiety, or even worse, fear or hatred, which might then cause us to turn away from God, and so also each other. So we need to claim our status and the status of others as reverently and wonderfully made by God. That's why having a place like this is so important. Look at all of you. Each one of you is a whole lot different than the other people in this sanctuary. Some of that we can see with our eyes, and other pieces might be a little bit harder to see. I loved hearing from Pastor Tom that you all are celebrating Pride all throughout June here, that each Sunday was a Pride Sunday. And this Sunday is actually Open and Affirming Sunday in the United Church of Christ. That tells me that, along with the parts of the service we've been through so far, you do not make judgments based on sexual orientation or gender expression, or race, or primary language, or physical ability, or things we can't see, like economic status, neurodivergence, mental health challenges. You don't judge based on who has kids, who's single, who's married, or something that might be pretty divisive in other churches, the type of music that you like to have in worship. You, Hillside Community Church, are a Christian community committed to God's radical love and welcome, and I am very grateful to get to be a part of that with you today. So let's recognize and celebrate how far we have come in the fight for LGBTQ+ rights. Consider the Stonewall riots that began on June 28, 1969, and continued over 6 days of violent clashes with the law enforcement outside the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar on Christopher Street in New York City. The patrons fought back against a police raid, and that moment was the catalyst that ignited the gay rights movement in the United States and in the world. So riots expose deep-rooted inequities, disrupt apathy, and usually ignite larger, needed movements for justice. Just saying. In the case of Stonewall, over the following weeks, members of the community quickly organized into activist groups, fighting to establish places where queer people could be open about their sexual orientation without fear of being arrested. Remember when marriage equality passed right here in Massachusetts on May 17, 2004, the first state to legalize same-sex marriage in all of the United States? And just 10 years ago, on June 26, 2015, the Supreme Court ruled that same-sex couples have the right to marry no matter which state they live in. And all those couples who were already married had their marriages recognized across the country for the first time. And again, people rallied outside the historical Stonewall Inn. I'm from New York, originally, as you might be able to tell by my accent. And I remember standing outside Stonewall with my now wife, Taylor, after having been involved in the fight for marriage equality in New York for years, thinking, like many people, that I never imagined this day. I never imagined that I would be able to marry the person I love and for that marriage to be legally recognized across the country. It's a right that is so often overlooked by the vast majority of people. And for now, Taylor's and my marriage is still recognized in all 50 states. And we have a 3-year-old, TJ, And we were married for years before we even began to think about having TJ. A 3-year-old boy who Taylor birthed, and whose birth certificate also has my name, and who I've raised along with Taylor since the day he was born, who I adopted in January to make sure that I will have full parental rights with the administration that I knew was coming into the White House. I'm only one of many who scrambled after November's election to do whatever possible to protect ourselves and our families. So, beloveds, we still have a long way to go. Did you know that there were over 500 anti-LGBTQ+ laws passed in the United States in the last year? God knows I feel for the trans youth right now. Last week, you might have seen that the Supreme Court issued their decision in the United States versus Scrimetti, which upheld Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for minors. One of the biggest trans rights cases of our time is one that we just lost. And as you might imagine, this case was brought by Christians, as most of the laws that pass are written, supported, and justified by Christians. These are Christians who are denying the goodness, the holiness, the sacredness, and the worthiness of queer and trans children of God, almost as if they have never read Psalm 139 or many of our scriptures that detail God's expansive love. So we must be the Christians who change that. In the years following Stonewall, Pride was a march, not a parade. And we must continue that march for justice, for all of God's wonderfully made people still being rejected, beaten, jailed, and even killed all over the world because of their sexual orientation or gender expression. It's overwhelming and heartbreaking, and sometimes it feels hopeless, but we must keep marching. And we must march not only for the rights of LGBTQ+ people, but for all people of God's reverently and wonderfully made creation. We fight because it's how we hold on to our humanity, our God-given instinct to care for one another. And God knows who we are. This means that we are each free to bring our entire selves and our entire stories as humans, with our hurts and our rejections, our unique differences, our failures and our successes, and our celebrations before God. And because of this, we should always be able to share our whole selves with the world and not feel like we need to remain hidden. God created me to be who I am. God made me Christian and queer. And I know that God is with me in every moment that my sexuality is used against me. Every moment that I feel rejected, God knows me fully, and I do not need to feel shame over who I have been created, queerly beloved. And God created you to be exactly and wholly who you are, a work of art. What greater love than that? It's God's promise to us. You are uniquely beloved by God. So queers and allies, and however you identify, and whatever your views on marriage are, remember that these vows were a hard-won fight. And imagine that these vows are about sharing God's love. So know that God is saying this to you. I, God, take each one of you to be my beloved, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish from this moment and from the moment I formed your inward parts, from this day forward until you breathe your last breath, and even then, I will continue loving you. That's what Psalm 139 tells us. So, queerly beloved, and all of God's beloved, we are gathered here today to once again affirm the sacredness of all sexualities and gender expressions. We know our work toward justice for the LGBTQ+ community and all marginalized communities is far from over. Let us pledge to use our voices as advocates to end violence and discrimination against LGBTQ+ and all people. May we continue along our individual journeys, that we grow beyond simply accepting what we understand, to affirming the holiness of all people just as they are. Most of all, may we always honor the expansive love of God, standing in solidarity with members of the queer community and other marginalized communities as we work together to achieve God's justice here on earth. So know that you, no matter who you love, no matter how you look, no matter how you identify yourself, you are reverently and wonderfully made by God, created in God's own image, fully known by God, and beloved by God. May we be reminded of that as we keep moving forward toward a world full of God's radical love, acceptance, and affirmation. May it be so.